Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture.
Greetings, plant people. How's everybody doing today? This lovely day after, at least in my neck of the woods, we received a soaking rain.
Needed it.
So excited.
Yeah.
The first text
message
I got from Jessica this morning was, "My rain gauge reads 1.5 inches. What does yours read?"
Yep. First thing I did this morning.
I don't recall a more dry here in our neck of the woods in the world and in the state. A more dry April. I mean, it was not typical. Yeah.
Somebody was talking the other day about fourth driest on record or something.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, I was going to say,
I knew it was dry.
Like, a week ago, we were top 5. So, and I think we moved up into the top 4, like on ever.
It was just unusual.
You can definitely see it though, especially like out in the pastures and the hay fields, because it's like, people are like right now debating like, okay, if I cut hay, like if we don't get a rain, that might be it.
Yeah.
Did you
especially after like drought last fall, like the fall, and then another spring drought, like wild.
Here's a little experiential question. Did you all have any things that you tried to do in the day or two leading up that you wanted to get done before it rained?
Yes.
So like a suburban landscape, cut the grass. You may want to get the grass cut before a bunch of rain comes or something like that. But are there other examples of that?
Yes, our household, it was planting lots of sweet corn. And other things, and getting other garden prep done. That was the big things in our neck of the woods.
When you say garden prep, was that plowing, tilling, or disking? What was that?
Yeah, it was tilling up the garden again and getting everything prepped for, hopefully then, like once things dry out, there'll be more planting that will take place as we are getting more into that safe zone, even though it feels like it's been safe this whole time, but it might not be.
Warm earlier. Yeah, very, very warm early on. We had 85-degree days when we should be having 65-degree days consistently.
Yeah. Crazy. We had a lot of that going on.
We're gonna get one last cold. I just know it.
I have too many coleuses out. Too many. I got 18 in one flower bed. I can't cover them all.
I saw my neighbor putting out his tomatoes, so I put up my tomatoes. I was like, I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to. He's not beating me.
Well,
this
Ray,
year.
You got to beat him.
Arms race.
I do.
Really got to.
And not only that, but only short season varieties. I'm like, listen, I'm relying on science and pure dumb luck to make this happen. Pure dumb luck. Yeah.
Some other stuff that I think about, like timing it with rain. Jessica, you mentioned earlier that or just a second ago about the soil prep. Normally, under typical conditions, we often have springs where it's too wet to get into the field to do prep. So that's one of those where it's kind of the opposite, where you're trying to take care of that as much as you can. If you're not familiar with that, the reason why, and can correct me, but when the soil is wet, particularly if there's a lot of clay in the soil, you'll chop it up and it'll just chunk up into these big bricks. You're not really breaking stuff up, these big soil clods, and then that makes it difficult to do lots of other stuff later. You can also tear up the field and get stuck and all kinds of other fun stuff when it's wet.
Not the soil structure.
Not my soil structure.
Not the gumdrop buttons.
Oh no.
I was about to go fully into the gingerbread man, but
you were. I felt you getting ready to go over it. Yeah.
Inside me, there is Brett, and there's the gingerbread man.
Come on, Gingy.
Brett is winning.
It's going to come out before this episode ends. Gingy is coming out.
But another thing too, I think fungicide. People sometimes want to spray fungicide on after, but most of our fungicides are prophylactic. So they, much like birth control, they mostly work on the front end of the experience. And so getting stuff sprayed that might have some disease pressure or whatever ahead of rainy times is another thing. And I put down a little bit of herbicide in some areas that are hard to mow well ahead of the rain to let it dry and kind of soak in. But it's a funny, I'm always just curious what, yesterday I got my rain barrel pump system set up. Got all the plugs and everything routed and made sure all of them were emptied out into the secondary reservoirs. But I don't know. I always just like to poll people. Did you have anything, Alexis, that you kind of think about right before big rain after dry?
Usually I'm in what would be destroyed by the rain if I don't cut it from like a flower perspective.
It's destroyed by the like disease
just
and stuff,
wind.
or
It could be wind. It could be water spots. It could just be like, everybody who's ever had a peony has experienced the peonies flop, over, so stems can get broken. Just kind of the very, blooms are knocked off, those types of things. And I'm usually behind, so not everything gets picked, and then I get to realize it was an experiment the whole time, and actually, it's not that big a deal.
Some things are beyond your control, Alexis. Some things.
We also did a lot of cleanup as well, because there were a lot of things, because with this rain, there's also a lot of strong winds that came through. So it's like, well, this is the perfect opportunity to pick up all those containers and everything before they blow around the yard into other places. So it was kind of like, get stuff planted, and then also let's clean, like the stress cleaning that you do before people come over to your house. Clean everything up quickly. Yeah.
I was doing some of that yesterday too. It's things that I had just left outside because it wasn't going to rain for forever.
Right.
Yeah. Just like, oh yeah, let's just not leave these tools out to just get rusted overnight. That'd be cool, and make sure that all these things aren't just collecting gallons and gallons of water that I have to then dump out somewhere.
Mosquito bins.
Yep. Before mosquitoes move in.
Yeah. Cool. Well, a lot of that type of experience, those senses, like I got to the point now, or now I'm a little bit more tuned to the bone side, but back when I was working at the research farm, it was like watching the forecast and getting a sense of, okay, we have to get this piece of equipment and do this now. Like I need to stay until 8:00 tonight to do this, because if we don't, it's raining the next 4 days. That type of experience and like sensibility, it almost starts to like become less of an intellectual thing and more like you can just feel that thing needs to happen. And that just comes through like lots of experience, and experience is a nice way of saying making mistakes and messing up and realizing it after the fact, and maybe you knew, maybe you didn't, but I think when you make those mistakes, sometimes it can be easy to feel like you don't actually know what you're doing. And there's this thing that I've seen that happens sometimes with the people we work with, a lot of the producers across the state, technical assistance people, everybody else, where they're very, very competent. They're very smart. They're experienced. They're talented. They're all these things. And yet they come to believe that they are a fake, that they are hiding out, that they are going to be found out to be an imposter. And in this era where Dunning-Kruger effects are running rampant everywhere, lots of people think that they know all kinds of things that they don't. It's really heartbreaking to sometimes see people who do know what they're talking about doubt themselves. And so I thought, I was I was at this meeting recently with a person who's thinking about starting a new enterprise. And he said something to me, like it wasn't a question, it was a statement. He was talking about experiencing imposter syndrome himself. And then he said to me, well, you don't experience it. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess I come off as cocky as I feel, because you're exactly right, bro. If anything, I'm underutilized, for my no. But I thought it would be interesting to maybe talk about either times you've experienced this within this small ag horticulture world, or the times that you've seen other people maybe experience it, and just talk through what that means. And again, this is the culture of horticulture a little bit more of a personal episode. But does anybody feel like kicking us off when you felt like a phony?
I have a great example about my apple tree production.
Okay.
I teach apple grafting classes, apple tree care classes. I know a lot about apple trees, and I doubt myself constantly with, plant spacing. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back and like reread extension publications, texted Alexis, like there's so many times of like things in horticulture that I should know, or I do know,
You do
but
know when you're telling it to someone
to
else.
somebody else, but then it comes down to it. I don't know. There's countless times that I've talked with Alexis about things and I'm just like, "Is this right? Like, do we do this, this certain way?" And it's like, yeah, and I don't know why that is, like, why we do that, to ourselves when we know it's right. So
Mm. And do you feel like you feel like you should know it, or is it that you do know it, but you just start to doubt yourself?
I think I start to doubt myself because then
Mhm.
I start thinking too, I'm like, well, here I am, this person who's supposed to be teaching
I'm
others,
supposed to
and
know.
if somebody comes to my house, I'll be like, "Wow, why are those apples planted in such a strange way?" You know, is it a new technique?
It's an experiment. That's what you tell
right?
people.
I'm running my
I'm
own
so
research project.
experienced. I can experiment at
You
this.
told me
Right?
I'm learning
3
what
inches
doesn't
on
work.
center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's things like that all the time that
Mm.
I do, and then especially my husband who's born in the city, who he doesn't listen, but I think some of his friends listen, uh, that, he is a farmer, but he
Mm.
definitely he is a farmer, but he definitely will tell people a lot of times that he is not a farmer, and is that, like, example of
Is it
he's
a
like, "Oh,
hobby? Like,
no."
what does he call it if he doesn't call it,
He's
like,
like,
farming?
I like," I guess he compares himself to, like, my dad or my brother, but I'm like, "You're a more diverse producer than both of them." So
Mhm. I
So
think where
it's
I
also
see
the
it a lot
21st
with
century.
people, yeah, is like they are not full-time farmers. I mean, they're full-time, they're putting in the work from an hourly standpoint, but they have an off-farm job to help support. And so because they're not farming as their full-time gig on paper and maybe like bringing in a full job salary with all
Yeah.
that stuff, they don't consider themselves a farmer, and that's just not the case. And I want to say, for those of you feeling imposter syndrome surrounding farming or whatever, there is no police going to come and say that you're not actually a farmer. Like, call yourself whatever you want, right? Like, just believe it, because if you're putting in the work, doing whatever you're doing, just roll with it. No one who's gonna stop you. Who's gonna stop you? I'm just that's my
because
Look at
vibe on it.
look
we
Like,
at
who's
related.
also
gonna correct me? Who's gonna
we
correct
also
me?
know lots of
Nobody's gonna
people
say
who are
anything.
not really farmers, but, like, so you're right, like, nobody is going to correct you.
And if they believe themselves a farmer, and maybe I don't, but I'm not gonna correct
Self-identify.
them. Who am I
Identify
gonna
as a
correct
farmer.
them? Yeah.
Yeah. My dad one time said, he said, "The tough thing about being a farmer is that nobody confers that degree upon you." He
Mhm.
said that it's sort of a broad thing to him because, we grew up at one point in our lives, we were farming almost exclusively other people's land. We were the help. We were not the owner of the land. And I was like, are we the farmers or just the help? Even though we were making all the decisions, it was offside ownership.
Mhm.
We were farming everything and we benefited on shares from everything on the farm. It's very diversified. But, and so we had this conversation and he said that nobody confers the title like a doctor. You become a doctor and you're conferred a title with the degree and all the associated, or a lawyer or whatever. He said, nobody confers that on you. If you're a farmer, you just have to be a farmer by doing farming, by growing and working with living things and systems. But that always stuck with me, that nobody confers the degree of a farmer. I mean, yes, technically you can be specialized in a degree from university or formal education, but as far as, there's no degree for that farmer. It's interesting. That was a good point, Alexis, and it made me think about what Dad used to say, and I hadn't thought about that in a very long time. That he said, nope, he said, you are only a farmer if you consider yourself to be one. So yeah.
Mhm.
Well, can
Yeah, and I mean
we
this with farming. Don't go tell people you're a doctor if
Right.
you're
Yes,
not
don't
an
do that.
Do
actual
Don't
not
do
do
that. No,
that.
that is
Too late.
different.
Too late.
Yeah, I'm practicing a doctoring, so therefore I must be a doctor. Yes, yeah, got
There are
band-aids, will
different
travel.
doctors of doctors too, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly. Yeah, the
to
specializations are real. Yeah.
Well, so can we just briefly, before we keep on can we stay with this, and what is the point of oneself calling oneself a farmer, or what's the value, or why would we encourage someone to call themselves that or not? Or like, why do you think people, because I find this to be a really interesting contested term that 50 plus years ago would have been used often pejoratively, negatively, critically, or like sort of dismiss someone as a, whatever kind of
Just a
farmer, backward, whatever. And now it's kind of in some ways come more in vogue, and become in some systems kind of a cool thing to say about yourself. And I'm just curious what you all think, like why is it, what's the point of encouraging someone to call themselves a farmer?
Taxes, baby, Schedule F.
I was gonna say, there's, like, the cultural side of it, just kind of like you said, where people are like, "Oh, wow, how cool, you grow food," right? Where most people don't grow their own food. To just like what Alexis said, taxes, you can't if you want to farm and there are opportunities for funding or different loans available, you cannot get those loans unless you are, actually you proving that you are a farmer, right? You can't get some of those special incentives that will help you along your farming journey unless you can actually prove to them that, yeah, I legit am growing crops or I have livestock and, this is how much I've made on them or my expenses with, these materials. So I think there's like two sides of that, right? There's like the financial side of it, and then there's just the cultural
The
kind of side.
identity, the way you identify.
Yeah.
And I think the identity part's really important for me, and it always has been, because I think if people identify themselves as a farmer, a real farmer, I was like, what's a real farmer? I don't know. But they identify themselves as a farmer, they are more likely to seek out informal, supportive relationships for farming. And to me, that's extremely important within a community. And I know that I didn't always feel that way when I was particularly a teenager, and I looked around high school and I was definitely in the minority. There wasn't a lot of folks around that were growing things like we were, all the things. Um, and it's easy to get off to yourself. But I think as an adult, and I've worked with different producers, that if they identify themselves as a farmer, they'll tend to seek out, other groups of farmers, and that helps normalize the
Community.
failures in farming that's so inherent, because you're working with weather patterns and biological events that are beyond your control. And I think about baseball, oddly enough, at this point in the conversation, because I heard a coach many years ago, to refer to baseball as a failure based sport. You're supposed to strike out the majority of times, but it's that 20th time that you hit a homer, hit a base hit, then you're winning in that moment. Farming's sort of the same way. It's sometimes almost a failure based sport where you're not always going to win, even though you do a good job, you're knowledgeable. There's things beyond your control, like we talked about earlier, Alexis, things beyond your control. But if farmers identify themselves as a farmer, they tend to seek out those relationships with the community. I mean, sometimes I kind of poke fun at the local coffee hangout spot, but that's a really important place for people to normalize their experiences of being a farmer and say, the soybeans just aren't doing good this year. I feel like I failed at them. Well, their next door neighbor says, no, not really. Mine aren't doing good either. So for me, it's an identity issue that's critically important, because once you identify with that, you will travel in those circles. And I believe those circles provide support within the community, both formally and informally. So identifying yourself as a farmer is kind of important, because you'll kind of seek out, relationships, I think.
This feels like it kind of leads me to this. I don't know if it, how new it is. It feels like a newer term that we've seen a lot of our specialty crop growers use, which is grower instead of using the term farmer. And
Yeah.
they're interchangeable, right? But like
Hmm.
farmer kind of has like, if someone tells you they're a farmer, usually that you're thinking like big ag,
Yeah.
livestock, corn,
Yeah.
soybean, agriculture, versus when someone tells you they're a grower, often you immediately go to some sort of specialty crop. I mean, at least I
Producer
do.
or
I don't know if
grower.
you all had
Mm.
that same just kind of immediate, recognition, and then they might tell you. But like in theory, they could both be interchangeable. Although I'm probably not going to use the term grower. Although I have on accident for like someone with pigs. I'm like, they're a pig grower. It's not, but
Yeah.
um,
I
you know
grow
what I mean. So
pigs.
and I don't know if that goes back to sort of this like community that you're saying, Ray, where people maybe didn't feel quite like a farmer, maybe they feel like they're too small or they're not growing enough, or, farmer has this, connotation of they're doing, livestock or something. So grower is something that they've come more around with.
I
And
see that
it
more
creates
with
that
first-time growers.
community.
Just what you said, Alexis. With first-time growers, they'll softly go into kind of the whole farmer aspect of things. They say, well, I grow the X or Y, I grow or I produce X or Y. And then I've met that same person years down the road. They're not much bigger than they were, but they're a farmer now. Not a lot has changed besides their comfort level of living in those circles. And I don't know, I wonder, Jessica, you mentioned like Sean, the way he identifies what he is. And it's interesting when you said that comment, that, it's just a way of how you identify yourself. Yeah, he's growing, he's more specialized, maybe growing more than a lot of other folks that consider themselves farmers. But it's interesting when the way people say whether they're a grower, a farmer, or some people will say I'm a hay producer, they'll be more specific. But
Right.
it's kind of about identity and how you see yourself.
But Sean would describe himself as a firefighter.
Yeah, he's a
Oh,
firefighter, a firefighter farmer, right? Finally got him to where he would say that. But
so he's not averse to labels entirely. It's
Right.
more something specific about the farm.
Right.
'Cause
Gotcha.
I am extremely averse to labels, personally, and like,
Brett is an enigma.
like people call me like a sociologist or an ag economist or a podcaster. I mean that's just what's in the popular press, and I do not like it at all. I am averse to it.
No,
I think
shall not be labeled.
labels are super powerful.
Yeah.
I think part of what we're talking about here is that there is a real political economy to who gets included and who doesn't. It's not just this little flitty, oh, I'm this or I'm that, and I don't feel comfortable with it. Like there are forces that sort of try to defend what a farmer is and what is not. There are governmental programs supporting things. I mean,
there's
just
definitions, right?
Yeah, just within the last 10 years or so, I think 10 years at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody told me it was 15, but let's say the last 15 years, there was a huge push to try to accept urban agriculture into USDA programs available for support. And so, for example, you would, before that, would have seen like a high tunnel would only go up on what would be considered a rural farm or operation. And now they're able to use USDA dollars for agriculture, for farmers, to put in high tunnels in a highly urban environment in Louisville, for instance. There's people who have relatively large high tunnels in their backyards, growing and selling into their local communities. And I have my own thoughts about it, but I think in general, a lot of times, if the imposter syndrome, if it's entirely coming from within the person, then talk to a therapist. We are not licensed clinical therapists. We are not any of those things. But I think it's
if you
also
need a hype man, we can help you there.
That's right. But it's also worth asking whose interest is it in, and whose interest is it for me to feel like an imposter, for me to not show up to an extension council meeting, or me to not show up and say, I too am doing this stuff in a very different way at a very different scale. But I had to clap back at somebody one time who was talking, Alexis, you'll be proud. They were talking about cut flower farms. It was in a fairly traditional, quote unquote, traditional ag conversation. And I was like, I mean, I know people who have made $30,000 on an acre while you all lost $100,000 on, 2,000 acres. Like there's a matter of scale here. There's also a matter of profitability. There's a matter of identity, and again, politics and economics behind this. And I think, to me, like, horticulture is a really interesting space because you'll have this core of people who are trying to make what they do valid, be seen as valid by the community, be seen as valid by the ag establishment, by these very traditional ag interests. And they're kind of defending that upward and saying, just like your giant row crop farm, I too am doing agriculture in a very different way. But there's also can be a tendency sometimes for people to sort of, who have moved to some level of whatever legitimacy means in that world, to also police the term for themselves downward. to say, if you've got 3 buckets with tomatoes in your backyard and you're selling them to your neighbor next door, you're not a farmer. You're out. And I maybe you are, maybe you aren't. I'm not here to make a ruling on that, but I do think it's a really interesting trying to justify validity while also police it downward. And the imposter syndrome piece fits in with that really, really well. And I don't know. I think there's a conversation about what we want our farming community to look like or be as we move forward that fits in with that. And that's a topic for another day. But anybody else got any imposter syndrome?
I think information paralysis plays into this, Brett. As everything's become or could potentially become specialized. And I'm one of those, anytime I'd sit down or write an extensive paper, like, when I was getting my master's or whatever, we had Savannah Columbia on an earlier episode, and we talked about some good work she was doing. Well, when I took, work on like that was an extensive work to myself. I'm a researcher. I had a professor finally say, Dr. Julie Zimmerman at UK, that said, Ray,
shout
at
out
some point
Julie.
shout out to Julie. She said, Ray, I know how much you love to read. At some point, you have to start writing. But I would read hundreds because I would get down a rabbit hole on a sideline, and I just had information paralysis. And I believe that sometimes happens with growers, as things have become more specialized, as they grow their operations. I don't know. It kind of plays into that for me because they're like, oh my goodness, well, yeah, I grow dahlias, but I don't know about fungicides, or I don't know about irrigation or high tunnels. And I don't know if you guys have ever ran into anybody, in that scenario in your professional capacities or even at home. But I think sometimes people, because they don't understand every single concept and all the information that's available to them, they're like, well, we're still learning. And my kind of comeback for that is, listen, if you're a producer, there is no new producer phase where you graduate from and then become a farmer. You are
Yeah.
always going to be learning because the information, the state of science is always going to be changing. And I don't know, I have a point here. I just don't know how to get to it, but
Well,
it's all the
yeah.
information.
No 2 days are the same in farming, right? No 2 seasons are the same.
Yeah.
There's always a new crop to try. There's always a new insect that's going to eat it that you've never had before, that you know nothing about. Like, there's not knowing everything is, I would say, a description of a farmer. Like, so if
Yeah.
you would describe yourself as not knowing everything, then welcome to the club, So
Maybe
Right.
that's what makes you
that's
a true producer, grower, farmer, whatever you want to, however
is
you,
admitting that you don't need to know everything, or
yeah,
you never will.
or
You
just
never
knowing
will,
what you
'cause
don't
it's
Yeah.
know.
different every single day, pretty much. Like you
Mhm.
said, every season is different. What
And
you
I
might
see
be
that.
doing last season, you might not do the next season.
Yeah, and it
You
varies a
might be
lot,
shaking
and
your
yeah,
head.
it's
What I
failure based. Yeah.
what I heard from what you were saying, Ray, is that you can almost feel like you've never read enough to be good enough to go forth and do. And the reality is, I think that farming, like a lot of life, is done in practice. It's not, you will do better if you have put some time into study and prepare. And you will do better if you take your failures and successes and reflect back on them in light of what other people are doing. And I think that your comment about the community part earlier really speaks to that too, of successes and failures. You can sort of commiserate and say, whoa, it's been a crazy good year for iris, for instance. Up in our house,
It has
iris
been.
are popping. Around our neighborhood,
Yeah.
iris is popping. It's been so dry. They aren't getting beat to hell by storms and disease, and they're loving it. And that's something you don't know unless you're able to kind of contextualize and understand. But fundamentally, it's about the practice. I mean, medicine's about the practice. You go to medical school, you do all this studying. I don't know if anybody's watched The Pit. Holy moly. Crazy. But thinking
My
about,
husband says that is very accurate
yeah,
from what he's experienced. So
yeah, that you're teaching, like, these students go and do internships and residency to learn on the job in practice. And you know what? People make mistakes, people die, things happen. And like, I think
Yeah,
that
it's
that's amazing.
I have a friend who, I've said this before, but she always says it's just flowers. And because she used to work in the NICU, and she said, I used to work with babies who are very sick, and so I flower farm now, and I just sometimes have to remind myself it's only flowers. And I'm
Mhm.
like, or it's, you don't want to lose your whole crop and the farm go under or anything. We're not making light of that situation, but in the grand scheme of things.
Perspective, right?
Perspective.
I think it's perspective, Jessica, and I see that more in either first generation producers. I see that more in them, or just producers that are new to growing things and working in those systems. I see that a whole lot more, but it's that perspective that you can only gain by, going through a few seasons, learning what to pay attention to, knowing what you don't know, and growing what you can grow. And that's just that's a time factor, but yeah, perspective, that's a good one that plays into all the conversation here.
I think imposter syndrome is something that it's always been real, but maybe the terminology is more recent because we can so easily compare our lives online. And so, it's easy to look and be like, well, I'm also growing iris. Why aren't my iris looking like Brett's iris? And it's probably because he's better than me in every way.
Skill gap.
But
skill gap is what we call that. I wish.
It's, remembering that, number one, people post their highlight reels of their life, right? There's not the behind the scenes. But, also the one gimme I think with farming that you can always fall back on is your soil to begin with. I'm always going to bring it back to soil, right? Your soil's not the same. You're the weather you experience, even from your neighbor, might not be the same.
Totally.
There's a lot of things that are different. And so, if you're not going to give yourself the credit that you're due, you can always blame Mother Nature, right?
Yeah. I live 2 miles away from my parents. And also talked to my dad this morning about how much rain did you get at your house, right? Because that's what you do when you're a farmer.
Yeah,
and
you compare,
they had a different amount than we did 2 miles away. And he said, I didn't think the wind was that bad. And I said, well, I had a tree fall over last night at my house. So like you can be that close and experience very different things.
Yeah, I was looking at
but if you do, just remember it's not always your fault.
Right, exactly.
I was looking at a wind, like last night wind map, like peak gusts in like across different counties, and like in very short distances, the different peak was like 20 versus almost 60 miles an hour.
Wow,
and like very very tiny, within a county, within and that was pretty. I mean, it's exactly to that point, and I think there's also like a personality element to growing stuff and doing stuff that, like, whether you are the type of person to overlove something or underlove something, or whether you're the type of person who's like checking on it every day, or you're the person who has a little bit more of neglectful distance from what you're doing, or whether you are the type of person who's going to be in the books all the time, writing stuff out and making notes and comparing across time, or you're the type of person who's like, I'm going to take the holistic experience and write a lot of it off to variation. Like over time, you start to settle into who you are and what you're good at and what you like to do. And I think sometimes the imposter syndrome isn't unreal. Actually, it's like you're feeling the tension of trying to be someone that you're not.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, actually, you are being an imposter because you are not good at this. You don't enjoy
not being true to yourself,
and you are failing. Like this isn't some, you haven't miscalculated, but it's just kind of like, maybe that isn't for me. And that's a big part of what we do with the CCD stuff, is like trying to help people find stuff that works for them, that's going to work in a market, rather than trying to come up with the idea and then get people to do it around it, force people into growing something that's difficult to grow.
Just give me the recipe, Brett. I want the recipe. Just give me the recipe.
What should I grow that will definitely be successful both horticulturally and economically?
And I need a month by month recipe and to-do list on what to do. Yeah.
I'll just put it into one of the LLMs and get you your game plan. So do you think, I'm curious, in your all's experiences, as you've seen folks struggle with this, is there you've alluded to this, right? Is there a difference between people who this is their first foray into farming within family memory? They may be 3, 4, or 5 generations removed from the farm in some cases, versus people who are maybe coming from agricultural backgrounds. And if they're in horticulture, they're often maybe veering away from whatever the farm was doing before. Jessica, you mentioned diversifying into things that they hadn't done before. Do you think there's a difference there of what types of things people feel some type of way about?
Yeah, I do from like so I obviously I grew up at a farm on a farm with beef cattle, tobacco, corn, hay, all of that. But then I've gone a completely different route to a point. Like I have cows and stuff again, right? I like cows and all of livestock. But going that completely different way into vegetable production. Not that it's like looked upon differently, but I think it's a little different if you are somebody new starting off into it, and how that is viewed versus if you're coming from a more traditional and separating out if that is still not that it's not valued the same, right? Because my argument when I like to argue with my brother about things, from his more traditional ag to like what I'm doing. I'm like, well, did you eat today? Because what I'm doing is important, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm growing things to feed people. But I think, yeah, there definitely is um, a difference if you're just new to it joining in versus if you're coming from already the background of it and depending on like what your family had been doing before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like with
Yeah.
their system.
Sometimes
Yeah.
I've heard the comment, people would make the comment, "Oh, come back 5 years, we'll see if you're still here." And that always is jarring to me when I hear, I don't hear that often, but I've heard comments kind of like that in some circles, and I'm like, "Whoa, that's not very encouraging." If you're brand new, your opinion, if you are vocal and you are comfortable going to groups and stuff, and you voice your opinion on this and that, sometimes it's like, if you're brand new, sometimes you're viewed a bit differently.
Like
Uh,
green, right? Like
Yes, green, yeah.
I
It's,
guess it depends on, like, what the views are going because farming's hard,
yeah.
right? We all know, like, it's hard. There's a lot of manual labor. Even if you are using a lot of mechanical stuff, like, things break down and you have to fix
Mm.
them. So I think that's, like, the learning curve for, like, people who are new getting into it, when they see all these happy images online of frolicking, through flowers,
Yeah,
through your vegetables, through your hugging cows, things happen with those cows, right?
yeah,
Thing
yeah.
so,
Oh, yeah.
um so I think
Big
it's,
time.
that too. So
I've heard people do such a good job. And, farming has become specialized depending on which enterprise you're in and what your business setup is. And it's been interesting to me that some of the best growers, producers, farmers, whatever you see yourself as, and they've had to hire on labor on the farm to the point to where they have specialties on the farm, and they said, "I'm not a real farmer anymore. I just sort of manage things." I'm like,
Mm.
"What?" And that's on the complete opposite end of things. They've
Yeah.
been there, they've done that, they've done a good job, but they've had to
They're
hire
just
on
bookkeeping now,
specialties.
they feel.
Yeah, and it kind of gets in their head sometimes. They're like, "Yeah," because they love growing things, okay? But
Mm-hmm.
their operation has grown, and maybe that applies here a little bit, maybe it
They're a
doesn't, but
CEO.
they see themselves differently. They're more of a manager, and they're like, "I'm not a farmer, I'm just a manager." I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute." We talk about farm business all the time, and that's sort of an important aspect of larger
Mm-hmm.
operations is the farm management. It's an important aspect in all operations, in fact, that you're managing things. But because they're not out there with their hands in the dirt and their heads in the clouds, because they're not in that situation,
Mm.
they're maybe, working the books all day or something. They see themselves different. Which is an interesting thing to me because they're on the complete opposite end of the new scale.
Mm-hmm.
They're tenured and they said they're just a manager now, just a manager. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
I think that's about, being able to conceptualize the farm operation as more than just the self, which many of these businesses started as a singular entity. I mean, it is still yourself, but like when you tell someone these things need to be done and then they do it, it's this social construction of you getting out in the dirt and
Yeah,
harvesting the
yeah,
whatever, but
absolutely.
it is still a hard physical reality to account for.
Yeah,
Another thing that I've perceived, I think, particularly with people who are coming from outside of agricultural upbringing, where they didn't maybe grow up on a farm or whatever, maybe they visited their grandma's farm or something, there will sometimes be, I'll say this in a positive way and then in a negative way, there will be an openness to doing things differently that can be really empowering because you
mhm.
don't have a reference, you don't have the like weight of quote unquote tradition holding you back and saying, what would grandpa say if he saw me doing this?
Literal
But at the
sacred
same
cows.
time, it also, to me, it becomes associated with like sometimes a skepticism of some things that we talk about within extension. Like I think fruit trees are a really good example of this, that sometimes people are just, when we tell them they're challenging in a number of ways to grow apples, for instance, or challenging to grow in Kentucky for a variety of reasons. It's like sometimes they just won't hear or believe that. And that, if you want to grow apples for applesauce and you don't care what they look like, that's one tier. If you want the trees to survive at all, there's also that tier to think about. And I think that that's a really interesting, it's a place where that idea of being a farmer, or what it means to have agricultural knowledge, is like kind of contested. That it's kind of like, well, this is just the big ag system telling me that such and such a thing can't be done, and you all are bought by the chemical companies, so of course you're telling me to spray the chemicals, etc. And on the other hand, it reminds me of like Moneyball. You all seen the movie Moneyball, or read the book Moneyball, about the Oakland A's building a team around analytics instead of old school traditional scouts. It's actually very like comparable to lean data driven farming versus planting by the signs, or something like that. That's a little more
Farmer's
traditional.
Almanac, yeah.
And they are pretty successful. And at one point, one of the characters says to the other that like, you were really, really successful, but the first person through the wall always gets bloody, because you're the first person trying to push something new and push something different. So it's really hard to determine sometimes whether you are the first person through the wall doing something cool, or whether you are charging forward with a crate full of snake oil that you bought from someone who told you that this is simpler than it is. And in
Seeds
both
from
cases, what's that?
Said seeds from Etsy.
Seeds from Etsy.
Right. Yeah.
I think about all both Instagram and people who the most of their money comes from telling people how they can make $1 million on a quarter acre or something, like those types of things that you see around. And I think in both cases, like it it's a place where what is true and what is known is like, you could find people who are going to tell you both of those things are completely wrong and bad. And so it's, how would you not feel like an imposter to like try to move forward and even know the basic truth of what you're doing? And I think a lot of what we do in extension can be really helpful in that regard, where especially if it's approached with like, we want you to be successful. That's really our only goal, is to help you do things based on what we know. But that has always been something where I'll hear things, around from the broader sustainable ag community that are these real critiques of the systems that we have. And I find myself like, well, I think like I've seen some of the research and I think it's pretty compelling, and I've had experience with this thing and I think it's pretty compelling, but they're like yelling pretty loud. And that makes me almost want to like doubt, what I know or what I've seen. And vice versa, for people to say, you can't make any money and cut flowers or whatever. And it's like, well, false.
Yeah, I am. Thank you.
And so, yeah, I think that's just been something that's, these people competing for who's right and who's wrong tends to lead some people who just want to be successful and try things and learn and develop, pushes them into like feeling like they don't know because everybody's so confident that they're right. And the reality is, based on context, based on your own personality, your own abilities, it may work for you, and be very careful to tell other people that it will work for them, because that's not a guaranteed thing.
All of this that we're talking about today, I mean, it's we talk a lot about mental health and farming. That's an important aspect, and farming, a lot of other occupations, and just in general. But because your identity is oftentimes so tied up, in the concept that it's not just a job. You actually live a lot of times where you farm, and you don't go home from the farm. The farm is always with you. I mean, it's an important talk we've had today on multiple levels, but it goes back to identity and how you see yourself, and all the impact that has on not only your operation but your family and you personally. So it's an important concept, And
Well, in
the
the
topic today.
direct marketing world, we actively tell people that people want to buy from you, from your face, from your identity, from your farm. And so it's not only that your whole job is tied up in it, but now you also have this like billboard that is your face and identity that people associate with it. When they interact with you, they expect you to be that person. And it's just very easy and clear to see how it ends up being a little bit of a tricky thing to keep up all the time, and to not have those moments of feeling like, man, I am not who people think I am, or I am not the person to speak. But I think that's an honest engagement with the struggle. And I think most successful people I know at some point or another have questioned themselves at least. Am I the right person for this? Or should I even be doing this? And I think the more that we talk about it, the more normal it feels.
I know I can share too from like, if you are somebody who's starting out and you've been in the game for a couple years with it, time goes by faster than we think. And I know my husband and I have experienced this where somebody eventually said to us one day, they're like, well, you're one of the bigger growers at the market. And I was like, oh no, we're not. We're not a bigger grower at the market. But then, the more I thought about it, it was like, oh, wait, we've been around a while. Oh, wait, we have built over time. And so yeah, we weren't at first, so many years ago. But I think as a person who often does this to themselves with their own farming business, give yourself a little grace with it. And you probably are, don't be an imposter to yourself with your farming.
And if someone asks you to speak because they think you're awesome and they want you to share your knowledge, if you would like to share your knowledge, don't believe that little voice in your head that says you can't do this, or why would they ask you? You're not any good at this or whatever. Like, they're not going to go out of their way to make themselves look silly if you don't actually know what you're talking about. Like, come on. Like, they're asking you for a reason. So like, believe them, in that way. So just like a little tidbit, we talk with farmers a lot and ask them for, interviews, and we have them on here and all that kind of stuff. And they always tell us that. And we're just like, why would it? In my aggressive manner, I'm always like, why would I waste my time asking you if I didn't believe in you? Like, just saying. Just throwing it out there. So believe in yourself, damn it.
Yeah. Do it.
I didn't really share my own imposter story, but like, I think I feel it about a lot of things. I'm just sort of aware of how much I don't know and how much there is to know and all of those types of things. And I think I am in fact an imperfect person to speak in a situation or to do certain things. But what I've learned over time observing people who are in positions of power is that they too are imperfect and fraudulent to some extent in the same way that I am. And so for me, it's not so much I'm not an imposter. It's that everybody's making it up as they go and figuring it out.
Perfectly imperfect with everybody
else. And there's
everybody's
a core.
Imposter is anybody.
Well, exactly. And there's a core of knowledge and experience and other things. This is why I would come to you all about plant questions. Like it's not like everybody's just a complete fraud and everyone's lying. But like not everyone, no one is as perfect as their title might demand or suggest. And it's the same way with the rest of us. So like working on yourself, improving yourself, feeling like I'm a better version of myself today than I was yesterday is how I've tried to approach it, rather than trying to say you're not an imposter. I'm like, you are an imposter, bro. And all of us are. It's called society.
And everybody's believing me about it.
That's right.
You fooled them all. Tell yourself that. Just be like, I've fooled them all. Now I need to convince myself.
Just go in with the confidence of a bald man, and you will come out a winner.
Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it.
Well, awesome. We hope this was helpful. I think we've all experienced that. So maybe you just feel less alone in that area. So if you've got any thoughts or comments, or tell us how you have felt like an imposter, leave it in the show notes when you give us 5 stars, hopefully giving us 5 stars. It does help people find our show. So we do appreciate it. We also would love to know, we're thinking of a Halloween episode already, and we are thinking of some poisonous plants. So are there any plants that maybe you grow or you want to know more about? shoot us an email. That is in the show notes. You can also DM us on Instagram at Hort Culture Podcast. Send us your info for poisonous plants. We want to talk more about them. We know Halloween is in the future, but it all comes around a lot faster these days.
It's never too soon to be
in Alexis's
spooky.
heart. It's Halloween every day.
It's always poison plant season, baby.
It is.
But we appreciate you guys being here with us, and we hope you will join us next time. Have a great one.